Welcome back to RealHouseDIY. Today we're going to do the rough electrical install for floor heating. Here I have the Ditra floor heating system. Some manufacturers might be a little bit different install instructions for the rough electrical. So it is good to pick this out ahead of time, read through the instructions before you get to the electrical part. Now ideally you want to do the electrical roughing with no drywall on the walls. So make the decision if you want floor heat before drywalling. However, if you're just replacing a tile floor and you want to add floor heat, similar to what we're doing here, it is possible to do all this work with the drywall on the walls. It's a little bit trickier, but I have done it before and it works out well. So inside the box of your heating cable, you have all your instructions. They give you a heating cable install quick start sheet, as well as the more detailed instructions. But first you have to pick the length of the heating cable that you're going to need. And of course it's dependent on the square footage of your floor. And the length of the cable is going to be dependent on a couple other things as well. For example, you need to be a certain distance away from the walls, distance away from pipes, other heating sources, things like that. So what you'll do, you go into the Ditra Heat website. They have an online calculator there where you enter all the information for your room, and then they'll tell you the size of the cable that you need. So in my case, the cable I got covers 64 square feet, it's 120 volt, 6.8 amps. And that amp rating is important because that's going to tell you if you need a 14 gauge wire versus 12 gauge wire. In my case, 6.8 amps, I can use a 14 gauge wire for a 15 amp circuit breaker. The floor heat also has to be on a dedicated circuit per the install instructions. And in my location as a homeowner, I'm allowed to do my own electrical work, just need to have that inspected. In terms of tools and supplies that you need, start with the wire from your circuit breaker panel. So I'm going to use my 14-2 Romex, or you'll need the 12-2 Romex if you have the longer cable and you're going over, say, 12 amps. I have a 15 amp circuit breaker. That's the brand that matches the panel that I have. Again, if you have the longer cable that requires a 12-2 Romex, then you'll need a 20 amp circuit breaker. You'll need your insulated staples. These are the blue ones that you use. It covers both 14 and the 12 gauge Romex. Now ideally you're doing this install without drywall on the walls. In that case, you're going to use a 2 gang wide box with a mud ring, brings it down to a 1 gang that would fit your thermostat. However, the finished wall, you can't really do that. You could, but it wouldn't look very good. So in my case, I got the deepest 1 gang wide box that I could find. This one is 3.5 inches deep. Now I know I have 2x4 walls here, so that's going to cover 1/2 inch for the drywall, then 3 inches, then I still have a 1/2 inch to spare before you hit the other side of the wall. I took some of the extra stuff out of this box just so I have room to work with. I'll end up putting this ground wire back. Now this box does have a knockout right at the front, which would be ideal to use. However, when your thermostat is in here, it's deep enough that it's going to be covering that knockout, so you can't use that one. So what I did, I had a hole, so I drilled an extra knockout here. So that will accommodate the conduit that I'm going to use for the heating cable. I removed the knockout for this top corner here. That will cover the conduit for the sensor wires. So you have your heating cable spool, as well as 2 sensor wires. The heating cable is 120 volts, whereas the sensor wires, these are low voltage. You're not supposed to run those within the same conduit. And you might argue that these sensor wires don't even really need conduit. It's low voltage, doesn't matter. And finally, in the back of the box, I removed the knockout for the install of my Romex. For my conduit for the metal box, I'm using the 1/2 inch flexible metal conduit. So it looks like this, nice and flexible. Then for the connector to the box, using the 1/2 inch screw-in connector with insulation. So there it is, I already screwed it onto the end of the conduit here. You can see it has a nice plastic insulation here. If you don't get this connector, and you get the one that's bare metal at the top, then you can just get the plastic bushing, and that gets installed there to give protection for the wire. I got a 5-pack of those connectors, so on my 2 conduits, I can use 2 connectors with the soft plastic bushing for the wire protection on either end. Now the space I have to work with inside the wall from stud to stud, it's a very narrow wall in that space. It's 8 inches. And this flexible metal conduit, it bends just enough so that this one on the side here, I can get that bend within 8 inches just fine. Still be able to pull my wire through. And for cutting your conduit to length, it's easiest to use a multi-oscillating tool with a carbide metal cutting blade, and use some metal snips if you need to clean up any edges. And finally, the last thing you'll need is some pull string and some rag. So for the conduit, to get the pull string through the conduit, you have a little piece of a rag there to fill that space. On the other end, you're going to use a vacuum. Shop vac would be the best if you have one. And that's going to pull through to get your pull string through, and then use your pull string to pull your wires through later on. Then you got your other basic tools you need for wiring. Screwdriver, lineman's, needle nose pliers, etc. Now in order to get the full warranty on this system, you're going to need a multimeter and a mega ohm meter, also known as Megger or insulation resistance tester. There's a series of measurements you need to do on the wire to ensure you have continuity. In the insulation resistance test, it's basically be testing if you have any breaks in the insulation. And then you'll record these measurements for resistance, insulation resistance test, etc. before installation, after cable installation, and after tile installation. Get all that information in there. Then you're going to send this in to get your warranty. It makes sense for yourself too. You don't want to do this entire installation with a broken wire just to find out that your heat doesn't work and you've wasted $1,000. So to start, I did the cutout in the wall, put the box here, draw a line around so I know what to cut. Down at the bottom, here I marked a line. That's going to be the level of the tile floor. Your baseboard's going to go over that. So you're going to cut a hole big enough to get access in there, but small enough that's going to be covered up by your baseboard. You're going to drill or notch out your bottom plate. I just used a 1/2-inch drill bit and a chisel to get that material out. Drilled a hole down to the basement for my Romex, and then I pushed the Romex in down from the top, down through the hole here, another 30 feet or so to get through the basement to the panel. An extra space here is big enough to accommodate the 2 conduits. I ran the wire through the basement here, not on the bottom of the joist, but on the side of the joist, adding a blue insulated wire staples every 4.5 feet or shorter. I ran the wire with plenty of extra length here down to the bottom of the panel. Typically your empty spaces are going to be down at the bottom of the panel, so leave plenty of extra wire for that. Next, I'll get the pull string through the conduit before getting in the wall, just in case I have a little trouble with it. Be a little bit easier to fix that now. So get that started in one end, get the vacuum going. So you got it right to the end. You use a little hook to grab that, pull it out. It's definitely hard to get through right at the end here, where I had more of a bend. So there's that. I'm going to leave this right at the end and cut the string at the other end. So that one's ready to go. I'm going to put my bend back in this end. That I'll need for where that one goes into the conduit. Do the same on the next conduit. This is going to be a nice straight conduit. It comes straight down from the box. No bends in it, so this should be a little bit easier to get through. Again, I'll keep that right at the end. And cut off the string. Some space down at the bottom. Next, I have 2 lengths of dental floss. I'm going to tie these onto the ends of each conduit connector. And that's what's going to help pull these connectors into the box after the box is in the wall. And next I'm going to get the 2 conduits down into the wall. Make sure they're accessible down at the bottom. one's ready. And that one's ready to go. There's the conduit down at the bottom of the wall. So now I've got the box ready with the knockouts out. Got the connector in the back there where the Romex is going to come up right there. That's what I'm going to do first, and then I'm going to get each of the conduits in. So I'll have to feed the floss through these holes where the knockouts are. The curved conduit going on the side here, the straight conduit coming straight up. At this point, before you pull up that lower conduit, I have to tighten this connector for the Romex. So once that conduit is up, I won't have access to the screw. The first conduit on the side there is through. Get the lock nut on. There we go, get the lock nut started. And now that it's started, I'll get that other conduit up. All right, there we go. Got those two lock nuts started on each of the conduits. All right, so I got the lock nuts tightened up. The wire came out, the Romex is tightened up back there. Got this box tight to the wall so I can finish screwing that in. Last thing I'll do here is get my hook, get that string with the wire out for both of these. So I'll be all ready to go when it's time to pull those wires through for the in-floor heating wire and for the sensor wires. A quick look down at the floor. Got our two conduits, tuck these back into the wall a little bit. Also, when I'm ready for it, I will add a metal strap to secure these down at the bottom plate. And before I connect the circuit breaker down at the panel, just get some wire nuts on the ends of these wires here. I will, of course, keep that circuit breaker switched off until I'm ready to energize this circuit. Now, I did decide, since I have conduit hanging from this box, I don't want to just mount this right to the drywall. I have it right against the stud here, and I have screw holes on the sides of this metal box. So I'm just going to attach that to the stud, screwing at an angle. Alright, so we're done. It is possible to run conduit inside a finished wall to a box. If you use the metal conduit and metal box, don't forget to put your ground screw back in. Hope you found this video helpful, and thanks for watching.